Harbaugh is in the house, and of course, that's the big house. Mark Rogers TV talking Michigan football with the spring game last week, and we bring in Anthony Broome from Maize and Blue on the SB Nation platform, not just to size up the spring game, but the entirety of the spring session, of course, with Jim Harbaugh taking his first shot at revitalizing the Michigan program. Anthony, thanks so much for joining us. Let's start at quarterback. That's Harbaugh's position. And ironically, that's the position of most need and attention, of course, as it is everywhere, but especially considering the quarterback play in recent years. I thought Shane Morris played really well. 11 of 24 doesn't really speak to how well he played after those first few attempts, dropped the ball in the bucket pretty well down the sideline a few times. Just your thoughts about the quarterback position.
Yeah, I liked what I saw out of Shane Morris. Like you said, 11-24 doesn't really, jump off the page by any means, but there were quite a few drop passes in there. You didn't really see him go down the field too much. A couple deep throws that looked pretty good. A lot of bubble screens, a lot of short intermediate routes and stuff like that. But overall, he looked pretty comfortable in the offense. He looked in command. He looked in control, and he's really improved. One of the knocks on him has been he's a fastball thrower that doesn't really know how to put touch on his passes, and I think we saw a little bit more of that in the spring game.
So looking at Alex Malzone, my initial thoughts in watching the game were a little bit more erratic, a little safer with his throws. He threw underneath a lot. Your thoughts about Malzone in regards to his progression at this point?
Yeah, I think the thing about Alex is that he looked comfortable back there. He looked poised, but just a little bit off. Still needs some work with his mechanics and stuff like that. And I'm maybe expected to see a little bit more out of him, but overall, I don't think you can be too discouraged by that. I mean, we're talking about a kid who, most kids his age are preparing to go to prom right now. So I thought Alex did pretty well. A couple nice throws here and there. Got some work to do, but he's got plenty of time to develop and figure things out.
Yeah, I think we all need to keep in mind that these kids are out there after about 15 sessions. They're out there. They're playing a game in front of 50 or 60,000 people, and they're working on things. And it's not a finished product. Not that it's going to be the first week of September either, but we need to cut these guys a break. It's kind of similar to the combine where we're dissecting every little thing, and everybody has a ton of flaws. Well, they're going to have flaws. And but they've got a lot of practice time ahead of them, and things will work out to a certain extent. Jake Rudock in the mix. He's got 34 touchdowns at Iowa, so he's a known commodity. You and your staff probably scrambling a little bit just to probably, like me, have seen him play, but not extensively, and didn't really dissect him when he was on the field. So just your thoughts initially about Rudock.
Well, Rudock is a safer known commodity for Michigan. I think ideally you'd want to see one of the guys they have on the roster kind of rise up and take the reins in the position. But like you said with Rudock, he's a guy that has 2 years of starting experience. He's thrown, 34 touchdowns or so in his 2 years. 16 touchdowns, 5 interceptions last year. He could possibly be an Alex Smith type guy. Talking about quarterbacks that Harbaugh has kind of reined in and had to use in his offense. So I think Rudock will probably end up being the week 1 starter. Whether or not he ends up starting throughout the year really depends on how well he plays. And like I said, ideally, I think you'd want to see Shane Morris take the job.
And if it does turn out to be Rudock, I don't think what you just stated can be overstated. 5 interceptions when you've been used to in the 12 to 13 range, and that could make a difference in a football game or two. Running backs, offensive line, that's a pride of Michigan right there. Need to be able to run the football, and that's not been the case in recent years. And now you come into play with a veteran offensive line. So these guys haven't performed well running the football, but they're experienced at this point. And you've got a trio of running backs and maybe some more guys, because I saw a few other guys running around out there that looked pretty decent. So look at the running game for us from an offensive line and running back standpoint, and how you see it at this point.
Yeah, the running game is as symbiotic a relationship, in the game as there is in terms of what your offensive line is doing and how your running backs look. I think at times you saw some good things in the spring game out of Derek Green and Devion Smith. A couple nice runs there, but overall wasn't a great showing in the running game by any means. I think the offensive line still has a lot of work to do, and that's one of their biggest question marks going into the season. Now, with that being said, we're talking about a spring game that was the rosters were divided based on a spring game draft. So maybe you had 2 or 3 of your starters on one team and 2 or 3 of them on the other team. So the talent was split, but I think you'd want to see a little bit more there. And we're talking about, going back to talking about the quarterbacks, I think the running backs are going to have to help them out a lot this year, and they're going to have to run the ball to be successful. So you're hoping they can get that figured out, but, not a whole lot to really hang your hat on in the spring game.
Yeah, and sometimes people underestimate the complexity of the offensive line position. After quarterback, they say you want your most cerebral guys up front because they either need to be versatile and play any position, therefore they need to know 3 or 4 different assignments, or then you've got other guys that basically, because of their physicality, can only stay in one position, or because they're unable to learn other spots along the offensive line where you've got other guys who are versatile, and you got to figure that all out. And guys typically get hurt, and you got to use 6, 7, 8 guys at some point. All right, the wide receivers, Anthony, from what I saw, dropped passes early. Then they started to hang on to the football and make some plays downfield. But this is not typically, unless somebody emerges here, what we're used to seeing when we think Michigan wide receivers.
Yeah, they have quite a few players there that we think have some good upside in terms of guys like Brian Cole, who's an early enrollee along with Alex Malzone. Amara Darboh and J.U. Cheston are guys that are expected to start on the outside that, outside of a couple catches, had a couple drops and didn't really show a whole lot in the spring game. So I think, like you said, there's not really that one guy there. They have a lot of guys that can be good, but they don't know exactly what they have yet. And right now, even the last couple of days, it's come out that they're looking into adding possibly a graduate transfer wide receiver to add some depth to the position there. So we'll see what happens with that. Like I said, they got a lot of guys, but I don't know if they have the guy yet. Yeah, we'll see what happens. We've got a lot of time still.
Yeah, and again, going back to Anthony Carter, there's always been seemingly a great wide receiver at Michigan, just as much as any place in the country. So we'll keep an eye out for that and see if somebody steps up. Defense, I think what got lost in the national narrative, Anthony, is that the defense was pretty good last year. Everybody thought 5-7 that everything was screwed up on this team, and that wasn't the case. This defense was put in bad positions constantly and still bailed out the offense and won a few games. So the defense lost very little. So who are those guys that you're looking out for this fall?
I think the name right at the top of that list is Jabril Peppers. We're talking about a guy who was a 5-star kid coming out of high school, a guy that took a redshirt year his freshman season after a knee injury in first game against Appalachian State. So Jabril Peppers is that they're expecting him to be that superstar guy in the secondary. They're extremely deep at linebacker. They lost Jake Ryan, but they've still got guys like Desmond Morgan, James Ross, Joe Bolden, just to name a few. And they're pretty deep there, and their defensive line has some good pieces there too. So I actually expect this defense to be better this year because, just the guys they have working with them. DJ Durkin, Greg Madison is still around. We've got a couple NFL guys coaching up the secondary. So we're definitely looking at a defense that will have to carry the load this year. And hopefully Michigan's hoping that the offense can be good enough to supplement that.
I've always been a big Blake Countess fan. Really good player.
Oh, yeah.
Ball hawk. 6 picks a couple years ago. He's had some injury issues, but when he's on the field, he's one of the better guys in the conference, no question, in the secondary. Anthony, any differences with Harbaugh? We see it from a media standpoint. He's out there. He's fun. He's unpredictable. He does crazy things. He's almost built up this image, and I don't think he's tried to. He's just being himself. That he kind of finds the limelight and does some offbeat stuff. But in terms of the football approach, can you really put your finger on any difference between the Brady Hoke regime and now with Harbaugh?
I think the biggest difference is that not just Harbaugh, but all the guys on that staff have been there before. They've been where this program wants to be. I mean, Jim Harbaugh, been to a Super Bowl. been to a couple NFC championship games, made a BCS game with Stanford of all places. A couple future head coaches probably on that staff with DJ Durkin, certainly, Tyrone Wheatley, maybe Tim Drevno gets a job in the future. But, there's just a lot of experience there. And, as opposed to the other staff where you thought maybe maybe they had what it takes, but that this staff has what it takes. And it should be just a matter of time before they figure it out. And I think that attitude has translated to the field pretty nicely already.
Yeah, I heard a national media conversation right when Harbaugh signed with Michigan, talking about all the great aspects and everything he brings to the program, but dropping him a tier or two in the coaching ranks because he never won a championship. I think that's ludicrous. What he did at Stanford was remarkable. They were winning 1 and 2 football games before he got there. And like you say, they win a BCS game when he gets there. They lose to Oklahoma State. But anyway, they get to a BCS game. Actually, they beat Virginia Tech in the Orange Bowl when he was there. Anyway, he gets them to BCS games, and then he goes to the San Francisco 49ers, and they're winning 4 and 5 games. He gets them to 3 straight championship games. They go to a Super Bowl. Hey, he can't go out and complete a 4th down pass in the Super Bowl to win the game. He basically put them in position to win the Super Bowl just because they didn't score the last touchdown. I don't think he should get knocked down a peg. So you got to be excited about that, Anthony, in terms of the Harbaugh regime, but it's not all going to come this year, and I know you know that very well.
Right. Yeah, I think a reasonable expectation for Michigan this year, and we said this before spring football, what we saw in the spring game kind of backs that up. This is probably an 8-win football team. Anything more than that is really great. There's a lot of talent there, but it is a big transition from the previous era. There's a lot of coaching up to be done, and especially on offense where it seems like they're just, I don't want to say they're completely far behind everyone else, but there's a lot of work to do there. And I think come year 2 and 3, you're going to start expecting to see 10, 11 seasons. Hopefully, that's the goal. So we'll see what happens.
And it's a tough schedule. The division's arguably the best in college football, and BYU and Utah are kind of undersold as being big game non-conference opponents, but they're pretty good football teams as well. So it's going to be difficult, no question about that. Anthony Broome joining us from the SB Nation platform for Michigan Athletics. Maize and Blue. Anthony, thanks so much for jumping on for us.
Of course, anytime. Glad to be on.